Welcome to Psychic Holistic Spotlight of Rhode Island. I'm Kathy Costa, your host for today, and we also have Josie Ray co-hosting with me. And we have a repeat guest at this point, Lee Drescher. She's spoken with us about palm readings. Now she's going to talk about mediumship, card readings, the other ways that we can give messages to people. I know she's been reading for a while now, though, because I remember her from when I started, and that was a while ago now. How did you get started? Did you get started with the mediumship, or did you start with the palm reading first?
The palm reading is definitely, no, I added the palm reading.
Oh, I guess that came after.
When we had a palm seminar at the Onset Church, and this wonderful woman came from Maine and gave a course, and that was when I began to think about this, and I used her material, and then I used other material. And I will just say that this is the very best book that I have found on hand reading. It's called The Art of Hand Reading, and it's by Lori Reed.
Keep it up for a second. And that's the most helpful for you, though?
I find this to be the best book. It also has the four hands that the woman who taught me, the fire hand, the air hand, the earth hand, and the water hand. And other books tell you about all other kinds of hands, and I'd rather just
keep it simple.
Stick to the four basic.
Yeah.
Palm reading is just so complicated that this is a good book that I recommend for you to start with.
Yeah.
This is another book, and actually sometimes when I'm doing readings and I'm sitting in a fair waiting, I just carry this book in my bag, and I have it. It's by Hazel Whitaker, and it's also a good little book on palmistry, and it's a nice little size. Talks about the fingers and the lines, and this is a good little book too. Every book is a little different. There are all kinds of books that you can get online, and I find hands to be fascinating, and sometimes when someone puts their hands up, I can now am the point where I say, oh, that's a water hand, oh, that's a fire hand, and that's kind of fun. That person's fiery. That person's airy.
Yeah.
That person's full of emotions.
Yeah.
And that person is the
down to earth.
Down to earth, and the one who just picks up all the grunt work that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah.
But also, musicians and artists sometimes have earth hands. Very interesting.
Yeah, that would be. So, how long have you been offering the mediumship?
The mediumship I have been into. I have been going to the spiritual church for at least 20 years, and I've taken mediumship and healing. And I've studied with Irene Harding in Plymouth.
Okay.
And I studied with Kathleen
Hoffman.
in Onset.
Okay.
And actually, before that, I had done some tarot. I had had a course in tarot with someone a long, long time ago. I actually lived in Wellesley, Massachusetts for a while, and there was something called the Psi Symposium, and it was really fascinating. It was a group of people that got together about psychic things. There was a woman who came from Falmouth who saw angels and drew pictures of them. And there was another woman who talked one night on life is just a game, just like a chessboard. And then there was another woman who gave tarot. Anyway, I had done tarot before, and this is the Aleister Crowley deck, and this is my favorite.
I didn't realize you had a deck. Okay.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
And I actually had some really big cards. They were a little awkward. Maybe
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
better.
Some of the new cards are too big.
Yeah, I think they are. So anyway, this is the deck I like to use. And I find the illustrations to be really beautiful.
Yeah.
Here's the Hierophant.
Yeah.
And that's swords. That's, oh, here's the Queen of Cups.
Yeah. Some
Isn't
really nice
she
designs,
pretty?
though. Yeah. Some really nice designs though on the.
It has some
Cards.
lovely designs.
Yeah.
Here's the Magus, Mercury, the magician.
Tradition.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so would you prefer that when you're giving someone a reading, though, the tarot, the mediumship, or both?
Okay, so what I've discovered is, then I did do mediumship in the church and studied mediumship probably for 10 or 15 years. I did medium stay at the Onset Church for a long, long time. And I do read at fairs now. And I've discovered that I like to ask at the beginning of a reading, what are you looking for? Because usually people who come, and if they say they want to contact someone in spirit, and someone's just passed away, well, that's mediumship.
Yeah.
But if they say, I want you to tell me about my future and what's going to happen to me,
Those are definitely the cards. Then,
I'd say the cards.
Yeah.
And another really interesting thing that I've discovered is that I feel in everything, even palmistry, that your sixth sense comes through, and that you just get information, looking at a hand, looking at the cards, doing mediumship. And that the hands and the cards are a tool, but they can be very helpful sometimes. And so I like to do what people are looking for, and I found that the cards are good for the future, and that if they really are into spirit, they want mediumship.
Yeah.
So I found that works well. Sometimes I do both.
Yeah.
And I do like to use crystals. This crystal here is a beautiful crystal that was given to me, and this is rose quartz, and it means mother love. But it was given to me by Gary, who was a very talented artist and just such a creative guy and very active in the church. And he grew vegetables and gave them away. Just an amazing guy. And he actually had cancer, and he's passed away. And
I think I knew him.
I think you probably did.
Yeah.
Gary Rigo. And at one of the psychic fairs before he passed away, he just came over and gave me this crystal. So I really value this crystal.
Yeah.
And I love to have crystals just around. I think crystals enhance things.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, also there's some people at these psychic fairs who make this stuff called organite. And it's resin with like copper and silver and
Yeah, I have a few pieces at home.
and special things embedded in it. And one thing that's really amazing is it works with plants.
Oh.
If you put it near your plants, those plants really thrive. And
Yeah, I already knew about the electronics.
that
for
proves,
that. Yeah.
that really proves that it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I've only used it for my
too.
electronic stuff though, so I didn't know you can do it with plants too.
So what does it do? Keep your electronics working?
Well, what it does is it helps get all the free radicals to go away. I forget the details of it specifically, but because there's something with the free radicals of the electronics that gives off, and it just kind of keeps them at bay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So they don't get you.
Yeah,
I
so that's what
see.
I use them for, though. So
Oh,
yeah, it's just
okay.
nice to know there's
Protect-
another use for it, though, too. Yeah,
I think it's a very good use.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah,
And I do worry about little kids
Yeah.
who they're putting phones in front of and computers.
Yeah.
My daughter would put a computer with my grandson in bed at night, and I just worry what this was doing to these kids.
yeah. Yeah, so Orgonite helps with that, too. So that's another use for it,
Yeah.
though. Yeah. So you use the crystal ball sometimes, too, I believe?
I have. I don't a lot, but I have. And again, just because we've developed our sense of vision and mediumship, you can kind of look into a crystal ball and just
Kind of see in your,
see what
in
it
your
is.
mind's eye, yeah.
I would say the crystal ball is more like closer to mediumship because you're really drawing out of the air.
Right, yeah, yeah. That's one way to look at it, I guess, yeah. Now, with the mediumship, do you ever find that sometimes there's a persistent spirit that needs to really pass on that message to somebody that you might know, though, or like, you know, when you're, sometimes though, like with me, sometimes they come like 2 readings too early for the person that they meant for, and it drives me crazy until I can figure out who it is for. That's happened a couple of times, though. Have you run into that, though, yet with the mediumship?
You know, I was taught to do direct mediumship, and I prefer to do direct mediumship. And usually I can tell who the message is for. Not always, but sometimes. Most of the time, I can usually feel who the message goes to. And yes, I mean, I usually see a distinct person or know who it is, or someone in a uniform, or someone. Sometimes your listener doesn't always recognize who you're
No.
giving,
Right away.
who's coming through, and also they often want to have a special person, and it may not be that person that comes. And
Yeah.
I try to explain that to them.
Yeah.
And also, if a person is passed very recently, it takes them a while
Yeah.
on the other side to acclimate and come through.
Yeah, I've seen sometimes though, like that happened with me though, where there was somebody that hasn't been in spirit for that long, and they're coming through, but it's like a struggle trying to get the information from them, you know, when they're that new in the spirit side though. But I mean, they eventually come through though. It's like, you know, when the person's like, oh yeah, I recognize that piece, so that helps when they get the little bits and pieces, I find, for that. So it just, yeah. So the mediumship didn't take too long after the cards for you to develop that.
Well, I think sitting in circle and doing mediumship regularly is very important, and I still attend mediumship circles on a pretty regular basis with Patricia Millman and some people at the Wigwam. Actually, one girl, Danielle from Rhode Island, she's some really very good mediums, and there's quite a group of us, and
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep practicing it. And then the other thing is, it's important to just sit and meditate and connect with spirit too, to keep your connection. And you can really see people grow in mediumship. The more they do it, the better they get.
Yeah.
Yeah, with anything else, the more you practice, though, the better you are. Yeah, for sure.
There's 2 schools of learning that I have problems with. There are some schools of where they teach and learn, and it becomes like a special commodity that only certain people have. And we all have the abilities to speak to spirit and to listen to spirit. versus the other schools that, you know, there's no name for the schools. It's just the attitudes of the people who are teaching.
Yeah. The schools of thought, yeah.
And it even gets to the point of thinking that there aren't enough clients around and being competitive to get clients. And there are more than enough clients around.
Yeah.
What I have noticed, particularly after COVID, that people are absolutely starving for some counseling and guidance, and
Yes.
It's almost impossible to find a therapist or a social worker, and there's a real shortage. And some of these fairs, they've just come in hordes. And,
Yeah.
I see people more anxious for this kind of help than ever before. And it's interesting, we as mediums and psychic counselors, I think we help people
Yeah.
as much as a paid therapist.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yes.
don't replace therapists though, but I find it very, very helpful for a lot of the people that's sitting with me as well though, too, though. It's like, you know, sometimes they leave, it's like, okay, this is, you know, I'm not so crazy. I'm not so alone. You know, and a lot of times that's what we need though, you know, in just a half an hour or an hour, whatever the session might be. Yeah, so sometimes you just need that, like, okay, the missing piece of the puzzle, you know, and that you can find in a little bit of time though, talking to somebody. Yeah.
Well, mediumship is meant to be a healing modality.
Yes, it is healing.
And you give healing information to someone. And actually, I remember having an amazing revelation from Reverend Irene Harding. And my mother died, passed away, and we didn't get along that well. We were different kinds of people, and I don't think I ever lived up to my mother's standards. So the first reading, she said, well, your mother apologizes because I think she locked me in my room for most of my childhood. I think I spent a lot of it in my room and had an imaginary friend named Raggedy Ann. But then the second reading, so because my mother and I didn't get along too well, my father and I got along really well, and he used to like take me on the Cape, and I used to do things with him. And so Irene said, well, your mother was jealous of the time that you spent with your father. And I mean, that was a revelation.
Yeah,
and
an insight.
It's an insight that if you can give these kind of insights, like maybe some father was horrible to his child not because he didn't love him, but because he had another whole problem that nobody ever knew about.
Yeah. And sometimes though, knowing that though can help though with the person though too, though, some kind of solace for that though, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I just find all of this to be fascinating, and that some of the evidence that you get is so amazing. And actually, I have another friend who's very psychic and has done some reading. And do you remember when the bomber at the marathon in Boston, and they couldn't find him, and they were looking all over Watertown? And my friend said, there's something to do with a boat. And you know what would a boat have to do with some guy who's running around in the streets?
Trying to hide, yeah.
Well, he hid in a boat in somebody's backyard.
Yeah. Remember that story.
And she picked that up.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing though, to help with that though too. Also to what I find though too, with the mediumship though, for this just little story, sometimes people blame themselves though for making the person sick. You know, like I find that the past couple of years, especially with the COVID, since the COVID pandemic, more so though than before, where, you know, it's like some people have passed away because COVID is a very tough virus to get rid of. And I remember this one recently with me that she actually blamed herself for her brother passing away.
People do.
From
Yes,
that
people
though,
do.
and what I, it's like, well, sometimes people do have a hard time understanding. If it wasn't for that, it would have been something else that would have made him sick to pass away.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, it was just their time to go.
And people do blame themselves.
Yeah, and it's hard not to though. It's like, because if it was like, what if it wasn't me that caused him to get sick? So that's the human aspect of us though. So it's just like, have you ever come across that? And how do you handle that though with your clients when they come to you? Or there's just like no right answer to that, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure I've had exactly that. But if I did, I would try my very best to tell them that it wasn't their fault and that it was meant to be, and to tell them maybe what you told them, that if it hadn't been this, it might have been that.
Else,
And children, but what I do tell people, and what a lot of listeners and clients don't understand, is that when people pass over, they're suddenly pain-free, and they tend to be happy. And even young people are happy on the other side, and it's okay.
Yeah, I find a lot of people ask about how they are on that side. It's
And
like
they
lose the
don't-
physical aspect.
Yeah, and they feel so badly about losing them, but it's okay. It's destiny, possibly meant to be.
Yeah.
These things happen because...
I know with my son, he was driving, and I stopped letting him drive. I just had a bad feeling about it. And with him, it turns out that he was feeling depression, and he bought a drug to feel high. And that's what he died from. But it was his time. And the former producer of the show, June Finan, said she did his astrology chart, and she said he was in for a terrible hard time no matter what he did. This was just a rough spot for him.
For this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people have a rough chart. Actually, I gave my daughter an astrology reading when she was in her 20s or so. And I remember she came home from it, kind of glared at me and didn't seem very happy about it.
No. Yeah, sometimes people have a hard time finding, that we're not all meant to die old either. That's what I've noticed though too. It's like, we all want to be like 90, 100 years old when we pass away, but sometimes we're just not meant to. Sometimes we're all meant to be a lot younger when we cross back over to you though. Sometimes people struggle with that, I find. Yeah.
Well, for Justin, that's my son, he found that he was meant to be a guide for young people. They were going through transitions.
Yeah, so he had to experience that though.
In the course of 20 years, he's gone from small transitions to life return transitions, helping people work through them.
Oh, that's a big change.
Yeah, all the way through transitions.
Yeah.
And he loves it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Is that how you got into spiritualism? Losing your son?
That's how I got into being a producer and a director on this show. I was already in spiritualism. And
All right.
he was running the show. He was a little guy.
Yeah.
He loved telling all these grown-ups what to do as a director.
So we're almost at the end of the show, so I'm just looking to see if anybody has any questions for you, though, or just want to reach out with any comments, or a few productive ones. We always look for positive. How can we get a hold of you?
I suggest that you go to my business website, which is www.treasuretime.org. You can remember Treasure Time. Probably it'll come up, except there are a lot of treasure times around. It's not a completely original name. However, the reason it's called Treasure Time is because this is a show about children, and I work with children to put on plays about picture books. And the reason that I started doing this was because I was a nursery school teacher, and I had a little boy named Danny on Nantucket Island, actually, who called me Mrs. Treasure because he couldn't say Mrs. Drescher. And that's how it all started. But anyway, if you look at www.treasuretime.org, my name and number
It's on
are there.
On the website. Okay.
And I live in West Falmouth on the Cape.
Now,
In a big house.
yeah, oh yeah, they tend to be a
I'm
big deal on the Cape.
I'm trying very hard to get out of.
Or out of the house. Oh, okay. Well, time will tell. If it's supposed to happen, it'll happen. So when you meet CrossFit people, what is the most common questions that you get, though, when people are looking for guidance on what to do next, though?
A lot of people, I would say at least 50% of them want to know what's going to happen to them.
Okay.
What is their future going to be? What is their love life going to be?
Yeah.
How is their health? Or they might be concerned about another person and how they're doing, that they've lost a husband or a mother. But a lot of them have questions, and those certainly are the questions that I might ask.
Yeah.
What man is going to come into my life? What wonderful man? Or how are my kids going to be? How are my kids going to do? That's a big one too.
Do you ever get any questions about what to do next for work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should I stay in this job? Should I leave this job?
Yeah.
Should I take the new job? How's the new job going to go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a lot of different topics that we all wonder about everyday stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The basic, the fundamentals that make up our life that we
Yeah.
want to know.
Well, what I find when I'm reading for someone is there's always someone that has regular readings, and they ask you the same questions, and the suggestions come across. If you work on your relationship with your parents or your children or something like that, then that will improve. And then I would say, what have you done since the last time? And they haven't done anything, which is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, a lot of times people forget we have to do our part of stuff too. It doesn't
Yeah.
just magically appear out of nowhere. It doesn't quite work that way. Yeah.
So sometimes you can't help.
No, you can just,
They got to do their part too.
and I think you can remind them of that
Yeah.
in a gentle way.
Yeah, definitely the only way that they'll hear you, yes. Sometimes I get the relationship questions, though, in a card reading where, should I stay with the person that I'm with?
Oh, that all the time, yeah. Should
But
I stay with this person or not? Right.
Yeah, and when I find out when someone's been together with that person for 20, 30 years, I'm like, well, when was the last time you went on a date with them? And they would look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, because the regular routine, they forget. It's like, well, we haven't really done anything in a while. I'm like, try to go on a date, see where it goes, because the friendships, you have to keep up with friendships, but sometimes we forget that with the romantic relationships, you got to do the same thing too. Even though we forget that we live with them every day, it's like we forget that we have to do the work though too, even though we see the person every day at home. We come home to that person every day. It's sometimes by that point they come see me, they always have the wandering eyes. I'm like, I don't suggest that. you know? So,